Here on the Show Before the Show podcast, I, Benjamin Hill, Ben's Biz, have decided to resurrect a column that I used to write for MILB.com, Ben's Bookshelf. And over the years, over many years, over a decade plus, I would just feature books that in one way or another were, of course, about baseball and often in some way or another about minor league baseball. And I thought, you know what? That'd be a good thing to do on the podcast. So let's try it out. And here for the first podcast, Ben's Bookshelf, we have Michael Lortz, the author of Curveball at the Crossroads. Michael, thanks for being here with us today, or just with me, really.
Ben, always great to see you. Always great to talk to you. And thanks for having me on.
Yeah, my pleasure. And before we get into the book, I've known you, at least online through the internet for well over a decade. I think I first met you, so to speak, through a blog you were involved with or a website you were involved with, Bus Leagues Baseball. So if you could just give us an overview of, who you are and your baseball fandom, because I know it is deep and intense.
Sure. Thanks. Yeah, like you said, we met through Bus Leagues Baseball, and that was a freelance minor league baseball blog that I wrote for about 3 or 4 years or so. Really good idea out of the brain of Eric Angiovan and Brian Moynihan. And the two of them would just find writers, local writers in different regions that had good concentrations of minor league baseball. I live in the Tampa Bay area. There's a lot of Florida State League action, or what was the Florida State League. And so I would go to games once a week or so, be it the Clearwater Threshers, Tampa Yankees / Tarpons, Bradenton Marauders and stuff like that. And I would just write about the games on these websites. And we do game recaps. We do interviews of prospects, interviews of whoever. I think I interviewed a bus driver once. I interviewed the concession stand folks, just to get that real feel for minor league baseball. And we did it on an independent blog. And obviously you were doing what you were doing with minor league baseball at the big level, for the actual organization. So we always kind of looked up to you. It's kind of like the granddaddy of us all, And, but yeah, I did that for a few years. That was always writing about baseball has always been my side gig. I work as a government contractor. I've had various different jobs working with the U.S. military for most of the last 15, almost 20 years. And, I've always felt like baseball is just a great escape. I get out of work and I just go to a game, grab a beer and a hot dog and just sit in the bleachers. Even if it's just me and a $5 ticket, Tampa Bay, we have so much baseball between the Rays, the minor league, spring training. It's sort of a baseball paradise.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes bleachers and beer is really all you need to have a good evening, and you don't even need anyone else. Just sit down and enjoy the game. But now you've moved on to writing a debut novel, Curveball at the Crossroads. It is, in many ways a classic American story. I mean, it's about our national pastime, of course, but also the whole meeting the devil at the crossroads, rural Mississippi. That's a very ingrained myth in American culture. Robert Johnson, blues guitarist, and I know are familiar with all this. But if you could tell us about this book and how it came about.
So, yeah, absolutely. So the book, as you said, it kind of takes those two very Americana themes, baseball and making the deal with the devil at the crossroads, and just puts them together. I feel like this was as natural as peanut butter and jelly, and I was really surprised that nobody had ever done this before. We have a lot of stories about the devil with music, a lot of stories with the devil. There's even, there's the show Lucifer where the devil's a bar owner. And there's so many stories in media where people make deals with the devil, but there had never been one, or the closest I could find was Damn Yankees. And that was more or less from a fan's perspective. He makes a deal with the devil so the Yankees will lose, if I'm not mistaken about that. But never an athlete who makes a pact with the devil and sells his soul. And I was actually working with the military. I was in Afghanistan, and I feel like maybe I was listening to the devil went down to Georgia one day, and I said, oh, this would make a great baseball story. So it kind of turned it into a 5-page short story, sent it to a few friends. They were like, we need more, but this is, you have, introduction and conclusion way too quick. We need more. What happens to the guy? Like, how did his career grow and all that stuff? So it ended up being about a 200-page Word document during my time working with the military in Afghanistan. And as I mentioned to you prior to the interview, I had nothing else to do out there. It was work 12 hours. And then what do you do when you get off time? You know, you're just watching DVDs or you're maybe going to the gym. So I wrote a baseball novel. And then it sat on my desktop for years, or it sat on my hard drive. And when the pandemic hit, I realized that we didn't have any baseball and nobody had baseball. And I had this story that a bunch of people had liked that I'd sent it to, kind of just a rough draft. And I said, if I could get this thing published, it at least satisfies a need that there's an appetite. And it's not even really about making money. It's just feeding the appetite for sports while nobody was playing sports in real life. So I really just buckled down and I did a couple more edits of it and added a couple more voices, you know, rehashed a little dialogue here and there. I think I actually wrote the final chapter, which I liked the way it ended, but the ending that you read, the last 2 or 3 pages, kind of closed off the book. And that was written in early 2020 and got it out there and got it published.
Definitely a journey. And the protagonist in this book who makes the deal with the devil is Jamark. And there's a lot of detail about his baseball journey, you know, from a local phenom and an injury and then what happens after the deal. And a lot of the action does take place in minor league baseball, maybe not quite a minor league baseball that we are familiar with, a fictionalized minor league universe. But you know, through Bus Leagues baseball, going to so many games in the Tampa area, how did your knowledge of minor league baseball specifically inform this novel?
I love that question. It's a fantastic question. And you're absolutely right. I was able to kind of put myself in the small stadium, you know, and he pitches a game in Boise. And I've never been to Boise, but I can picture a small stadium in the middle of nowhere and 500 to maybe 2,000 people in attendance, a local announcer, just that whole small baseball, small town vibe really framed his early experiences, because he ends up making a deal with the devil when he's about 21 years old. So no team is just going to put him straight up into the majors. We all know that that's not the typical route any prospect gets, no less a prospect from the sandlots of rural Mississippi, sort of the Toe Nash story. If you remember Toe Nash from back in there, he was definitely a model in just this guy. One scout sees him, one scout signs him for, I think, $700 and new tires on his car. And so it's just this real shoestrings, low budget story of him. I say, like, after he encounters a minor league record along the way, and after that he's able to order a pizza with his minor league salary. So it is that reality that minor leaguers are really living by their shoestrings, and some of it is low budget. There is only one reporter covering a game, and that one reporter might be a college age student who's just trying to get some quotes to build her portfolio. So I definitely really played into that without going super in depth, but there is some baseball insider stuff there. And if there's a game in Durham, I had to put a game in Durham. I mean, if he's going through the minor leagues, he has to play at Durham at some point. So, I felt like putting the Durham Bulls in there was a nice touch. Now, there are no names in there, although there is one name, and that's the St. Pete Saints. The major league team is the St. Pete Saints, which was a minor league team. I believe one of the early versions of the Florida State League in the 1950s. I think it was a Class D or Class C team.
There you go. Real life informing fiction, I guess, as it so often does. You have to live a real life if you're going to write some fiction. I'm making very profound statements here. And in terms of the book itself, in terms of the way it's written, it's a chronological story, but often fantastical and often quite absurd with the scenarios that happen, little asides of, what someone says or what someone does. It keeps the reader on their toes, because as much as it's basically grounded in America, we recognize there's just an inherent layer of strangeness to it. Maybe in the same way you watch David Lynch, and it's kind of a little bit of a skewed take on, elements that we recognize, from suburbia, for instance. Anyway, I need to stop myself from being so profound with this question, but just wanted to ask you, who were your influences in writing this, and, what sort of tone were you trying to create?
That's a really good question as well. And I really appreciate you asking. There's an author out there named Brian Spaeth. And Brian, he was sort of a big influence on me in about the 2009 to 2012 timeframe. He was a blogger as well. And he would do these absurd NBA blogs. He did a blog called Yay Sports for a while. And he ended up writing a movie called Who Shot Mamba? And he wrote these books called, what was it? Flight of the Super Airplane, where it was just about this giant airplane that everybody would take cross country. And it was this big lobbying conflict between the giant airplane that holds like 5,000 people and a couple of companies that were making 2- and 3-seater airplanes, sort of like a private car versus, a bus. And it was grounded in reality, but it was very much sort of like an airplane. The Zuckerbergs, was it Zuckerberg or Zuckerman? Who did the airplane?
I think just Zucker, right?
Zucker, possibly.
Yeah, I should know that.
Very much like their type of sense of humor. And he had Bruce Willis as the pilot of the plane because Bruce Willis was a celebrity pilot. It was just really absurd, but it was really, there was a lot of plays on words in there and a lot of just ways to take things. And I was like, wow, here's this blogger, creative writer who wrote absurd takes about the NBA and would put his own characters into games. And it's like, this is a huge, he would pump out like a book a year of the Super Airplane, prequel to the Super Airplane, sequel to the Super Airplane. And I was like, wow, these are self-published things. And I wanted to do that. Like that was, just like you were writing for minor league baseball and we kind of looked up to you and, in the bus leagues. And I looked up to Brian as sort of a creative influence. I said, I want to do that. And I've also been highly influenced by The Curious Case of Sid Finch. The Sid Finch book is always a favorite of mine. Actually, I went and reread it after Curveball at the Crossroads was published. And I was like, wow, that's another absurd book. I mean, here's a Buddhist monk pitching with one shoe and, and the Mets find him and he joins the same starting rotation as Dwight Gooden. So now let's take that character, tone him down a little bit, make it a little bit more realistic, put him in the minor leagues, give him a deal with the devil, and put him back out there and see what happens.
Yeah, well, it's mythical, it's American, it's absurd, and if you want to see what happens, you have to read Curveball at the Crossroads by Michael Lortz. So now the most important question to wrap up on, if someone wants to read this book, how would they go about doing that?
So it's available on Amazon. It's available on Barnes & Noble, Walmart, anywhere you can order a book. I also have books. If somebody wants to message me, I can sign a book, and send it out to them. So I always keep a box of books in my living room at all times. If somebody wants a personalized book, we can definitely Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, everything like that. So Amazon and everywhere fine books are sold. You can also go to your local bookstore. So I also very much encourage supporting local bookstores. Your local bookstore can order it as well. It might take a couple more days, but you are supporting local bookstores and putting money back into your local economy.
Absolutely. And now I really do have to wrap it up because I booked this conference room only till 11:30 and there's someone waiting outside the door to get in here. Michael Lortz, Curveball at the Crossroads. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.